I really believe that people can tackle far more than they think they can. My name is Veronika Scott. I'm 24 years old, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Empowerment Plan here in Detroit. I think women have a really difficult time understanding how valuable they are. The idea of self-worth is very important to me because I grew up a kid of addicts, and we were kind of set up for failure. We were set up in a hole that we had to climb our way out of. I ended up getting a great scholarship to go to college, and a class ended up changing my entire life. The class assignment was designed something to fill actual needs. I did my research at homeless shelters. So the first product I created was the coat. The coat looks like a regular jacket during the day, but when you open it up, you can actually slide your feet in all the way up to your knees and Velcro it closed again to make a sleeping bag. I was talking to the homeless population in that area and getting feedback and making prototype after prototype. When I was on like prototype number 7, a woman came out of the shelter that I was in and she was yelling at me. She was full on screaming. And she said, "We don't need coats. Coats are pointless, we need jobs." And really, she was completely right. Because a coat is just a Band-Aid for a systemic issue. And what really would have the impact is hiring the population that would need them in the first place. We hire only individuals from homeless shelters, and then we train them in everything from sewing and manufacturing to employment, as well as tech and whatever they need to become more independent and to be proud of their accomplishments and be proud of themselves.
I'm happy to be working for a cause. It's no greater joy than me coming to work knowing that I can make this coat and help somebody that was in my position. So I take great pride in what I do. I really do.
You know, actually, I sat at my dinner table with my son last night and I cried because I was like, you know, last year we were just in a shelter and now this year we're in a home.
I was the only person that could create this opportunity for myself. And that's all we're trying to do, is give them the power to take control of the life that they want to lead. No matter what you've gone through, you still can do a lot with what you have.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome founder and CEO of the Empowerment Plan, Veronika Scott.
Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch.
I'm really excited to be here. And I have a quick question before we start this off. How many of you have actually been to Detroit? Like, raise of hands. Wow, that's like a good chunk of people. How many just like went to the airport and consider that? Okay, yeah, there's like 5 people in the front row. And like, put your hands down if it was just because you watched 8 Mile and felt like a deep connection to Eminem. 3 people in the front row were like, yes, that's exactly how I feel. And it's tough because I've been in Detroit, and my family has been in Detroit for generations, and I talk about the city. And it has gone through a lot of hard times, and it sounds like, especially from what I'm focused on, what I do, it sounds a lot worse than it is. And I say things that are the truth, but it's tough. But Detroit has grown so much and changed and is this amazing place that I couldn't have started an Empowerment Plan anywhere else in the world. You know, I could have only done it in the city of Detroit. So I'm going to say some things about the city, but I love it, and I wouldn't have been able to start this without that community and those individuals and those companies and everything else there. But like the video said, this all started off as a class project for me in college. I was studying product design, which is basically like making the art of making everyday objects like fast and sexy. We had a whole class devoted to making sexy toasters. There was a full 6-week course on making a toaster look sexy. And we didn't think anything of it, and it wasn't until years later I'm like talking to a group of like students, and they're like, well, can you draw us a sexy toaster? And they were really confused, like, what does that mean? I'm like, okay, toaster with a bra. Done, here you go, there's your sexy toaster. But we were really focused on designing things that were gonna be trendy and fast, and like I said, sexy, and that are gonna be done in a few years at most. And we had one group that came in and said, we want you to stop doing that. Like, there's a place for that, but you really need to fill an actual need. You know, it's one thing to say this needs to look that way, but there are people that are suffering, and there are ways that as a design student, as a designer, you can really make a huge impact. And so that really threw us all for a loop. And like any good college students, most of us just like Googled our way through research. And we're like, okay, Detroit needs. And at the time, and even now, you Google that, and Detroit has a lot of needs. And you get like public transportation, public education, things that you really can't tackle in a semester. And it made it very difficult. But after actually getting out there and talking to people, you hear over and over and over again about, you know, that individual that this person sees every day on their way to work. They're walking to work or they're walking to school, and they see this person. They have no idea what to do because they see this person outside every day, and it's freezing, and they want to make an impact, but they don't know how. And we heard that over and over and over again. And so like any good students, again, we go back to Google and like, okay, how do we find some homeless shelters? And we go to the first one that popped up and ended up going there at 8 o'clock at night. Now, we had gone there one time before, and I had gone with like 10 of my fellow classmates. And we show up, and this is not the most friendly building. It is a one-story, windowless gray building surrounded by barbed wire. It has one entrance, and it has hundreds of people waiting outside to get in. Because inside, there's only about 150 people that can be seated at any one time. And we drove by as like a group of a class of students, and most of them were like, we're never coming back again, we'll do research somewhere else. But I'm like, okay, this sounds interesting, why not? I'll come back. You know, there's gonna be a couple of my fellow classmates that will come with me. And so I show up there with a bag of like stuff, all these sticky notes, design research tools, a horribly written questionnaire that was basically like, can you tell me what your needs are? Can you describe your day-to-day life? Can you tell me what products exactly could help you in your day-to-day life? Very targeted, horribly written questionnaire. And a couple of disposable cameras. I had all this in a black trash bag. And I go through the one door. You have to go through 2 metal detectors and a pat down. And then you're given a number. As a person that enters the system as homeless, you are given a number. You're no longer identified by your name. You're told to write that number down so that they can better track you. And you are told to sit down for 8 hours. And everything you own must fit on your lap, otherwise it is thrown away as if it does not matter. And that's it. You get to watch television before the next group is rotated through. And the guy that was managing it that night, and I had shown up at 8 o'clock at night, exactly when they told me to, when the shift changed over, with all my stuff. And he pushes me out in front of the crowd, about like 50 people just sitting there. He says, good luck, you're gonna need it. And then clicks off the television. And everybody just stands up and starts swearing at me. And I'm just standing up there with my bag of stuff like up to my chest as if it's gonna protect me from bodily harm. It takes 10 minutes to calm everyone down. And at that point, all I can say was, you know, I'm sorry, I just want to talk to you. I'm a broke college student. I'm living with my grandparents, and I need your help with a class project. And I have no idea what I'm doing. Please help me. And I got about 10 people to talk to me, but the general response was, if you want to help us turn our television back on. I'm like, okay. But I showed back up again 2 days later. I ended up going to the same shelter 3 days a week, every week, for about 5 months at 8 o'clock at night, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Friday nights are very strange to hang out there, and most of my friends and family thought I was absolutely insane. But I had spent so much time. And what I found, and this was probably the most shocking, the one thing that inspired the empowerment plan was this playground that was covered in tarps, and 2 people were living inside of it. And it was 20 feet away from the shelter. It was literally across the street. I take a picture on my phone. I keep walking around. I come back a week later, and it was burned to the ground in a turf war, literally completely melted and leveled. And the 2 people ended up surviving that incident only to pass away a year or so later, just from being out in the elements for so long. And that's what inspired the jacket. That was me trying to say, like, why in the world would you do that? Why would you build yourself something when somebody is giving it to you for free, feet away? This is not miles. This is literally across the street. Why would you build it for yourself? And you realize that it really comes down to pride. At the end of the day, everybody's motivated to be independent and want to take care of themselves, but when we think of charity, sometimes we take out pride. We take out that people still want to be independent. And that, can you imagine spending every day of your life being told where you can sit, what you can eat, where you can sleep, when you can sleep, everything being dictated to you by other people? And the coat was my initial response of creating something that offered them that mobility, but that didn't look worn by 50 individuals before they got it. It wasn't someone else's trash. I didn't want to make anybody else feel worthless. And I came up with the coat. It took me 80 hours to make the first one. I suck at sewing. I still do. I'm really terrible at sewing. And I had to learn how to sew from my mother, which was the worst experience of my life. And it took 80 hours to make one, on average. I made them over and over again and brought them back to that same shelter. And by the end of the semester, I had a street name that I still have to this day. I am known as the coat lady or the crazy coat girl, one or the other. And so many people were excited about that. Strangers were coming up to me on the streets that had been chronically homeless for decades, coming up to me and saying, "Oh, you're the coat lady, right? So when are we going to get some coats? Like, when is this going to happen? When am I going to get a coat?" I'm like, "I never. Are you kidding me? Do you want something that weighs 25 pounds for some reason and takes 80 hours to make one? I wouldn't even give away what I make for free. That's mean. That's not okay." I was like, this is not going to be something. There's no way I can do this. I'm too young. I have an art school degree. I don't have any experience. Why in the world would I be the one to make this? But so many people kept asking that I was like, okay, I guess all I need now is money. All right, I have this coat, people want it, now I have to get money to make it. And going to art school, they don't really equip you with business management skills or finance background or anything to do with math and Excel. So I was like, I need to write a business plan. I have no idea what those look like. So I built the world's prettiest business plan. It was 15 pages, and 14 of them were pictures. And it had about 6 sentences total in the whole document, and one very, 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 very small Excel sheet in the back. And it said, it was like 3 lines long, said I needed about $1,600 to operate for a whole year. I was running a very lean budget. And basically all that broke down to was I need sewing machines. Magical elves are going to make it, but I need sewing machines. I have no way, no materials built in there, that was it. And I built that, and I brought it back to the shelter, and I was super excited with my newest prototype. And one of the ladies that I had spent a lot of time with at this point catches me while I'm leaving. And she starts yelling at me. This was a complete surprise. I had no idea why she would do that. And she was full on screaming. She had to be restrained. And I go up to her, I'm like, okay, hi, what happened? What did I do? She's like, your coats mean nothing. What you're doing is pointless. We don't need a jacket, we need a job. I don't care what you're doing with this coat thing. It doesn't mean anything to me. And she was completely right. And as a student, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to the drawing board and I'll figure out how to hire a couple people. I'll figure out how to do that. And it never occurred to me to maybe have somebody else make these coats. It never occurred to me to send it away to have somebody else make it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna add it in there. I'm gonna hire some people from the shelter and that's it, and we're set to go. And the first group of people that I hired, and this is my first time ever being on the other side of the interview table at this point. I interviewed about 6 people. I hired the 2 people that showed up early. I'm like, you're nice. Everybody I interviewed had a felony track record. I'm like, that doesn't matter. Who cares? Like, I didn't even use the resume at all. And the one that really got the job first was she was 2 hours early. I thought she was somebody else. And I was like, okay, sold, you're in. And she was there trying to tell me, she's like, I have 4 kids. 3 of them live with me. She's like, but they will not get in the way of me having a job. I'm like, why would that get in the way of you having a job? I'm like, okay, you don't need to convince me of anything. And the other woman had been in prison for about 10 years and had just been released the week before. And she's like, I just need this opportunity. I was like, okay, hired, we're ready to go. We ended up getting a few sewing machines donated to us, but that $1,600 went very quickly, a lot faster than I thought it would. And we ended up getting funded by the PayPal button on my blog for over a year, just from people donating $5, $10, $20, and that paid for those individuals' salaries for that first whole year. And with that, what was the most amazing thing was that the woman with 4 kids was able to move out of the shelter permanently within the first 3 months, was able to get her own place, have it furnished. Oh, that's all her. All her. And have her youngest son, who was 6 at the time, learning Japanese. All within the first 6 months of being employed. Well, the other individual that didn't have family, she ended up getting in a fight with a volunteer and not being able to show up to work, and it just ended horribly. But that really made me realize it's like we got to hire individuals that will have a lasting impact on them, will have a generational effect. It's not just one person, it's their whole family, and they're not just showing up to work to get money, but they're showing up to work to put food on the table. And I know what that's like. I have parents that are still unemployed to this day, that struggled with that constantly, that, being raised by a couple that doesn't know, can we afford rent? Can we afford groceries? Where are we going to be in a month? And that everybody else around my parents, my family, assumed that by extension, my siblings and I were just going to end up exactly like them. That we were going to just worthless by extension. That we wouldn't amount to anything, that because parents were addicts, because they didn't finish college, let alone, a couple of them didn't even finish high school, since that they didn't do that, that we were just going to end up the same way. And I always wondered, if somebody had created that opportunity for my own family, how could I have been raised differently? How could my siblings have ended up? How could we all have grown up a little bit different, maybe easier, maybe better, who knows? And I ended up wanting to create an opportunity that I wish was there for my own family. And so we went from 2 people, we're now at 30 individuals total on the team. Every single person we've ever hired has moved out of the shelter permanently within the first 3 to 6 months. No recidivism back, thank you. That's awesome. And we've made about 10,000 coats. We've distributed 10,000 coats to 30 states in the US, 6 Canadian provinces, and now New Zealand, France, and Australia, as of 2 weeks ago. And thank you. It is absolutely surreal to me that we've impacted 10,000 people that way, and globally. But I think the best part has been the people that we employ. So it's great that we've made 10,000 coats, but coats are Band-Aids. It's just a jacket. The cool part of what we do are the people that we hire. That's the best thing in the world. And so how do we employ 10,000 people? How do we change this around and scale that so we give 10,000 people the opportunity to get employment? Because we have 3.5 million that are homeless in the US. How do we make a dent? There's 20,000 homeless in the city of Detroit alone. How do we begin to make a dent in that? And so what we're really trying to do is radically change how traditional workforce development is done, where they expect people, usually within 6 weeks, to come in for a free program, but nothing is ever free. That person's time is valuable. They have to find a daycare. They have to find people that will watch it. They have to get gas. They have to figure out a way to get there. But what they need is income. They don't need a chance. They need immediate employment. Because what's been the most surprising thing about what I've done is that people tour Empowerment Plan all the time. We don't make food. You don't get free samples. There's no, we're really surprised that people want to walk through and look at what we're doing. And they always do this. They always pull somebody aside. And this is what I find the most shocking. And they don't realize how maybe offensive it may be. They'll pull somebody aside and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you were homeless. I'm like, what is that supposed to mean, 1? 2, what did you expect to see when you showed up here? What did you have in your mind that you were going to walk into our floor today and find? Because they're always shocked. And we're like, that, almost offended by that. But at the end of the day, people, if I say the word homeless, think of a homeless person, you have an image in your head immediately of what that looks like. And that's not how it is. That's not reality. We have individuals that have master's degrees, all the way to, yes, somebody that hasn't had a job in 10 years. And homelessness is not their defining characteristic. They've been through a lot. They have gone through some of the hardest things that anyone can possibly imagine and have come out better and stronger on the other side. A lot of people just kind of look at them and want to hear the story and hear them cry and tell me how sad and how hard it was. And there's that immediate pity. Like, I feel so bad for you. I saw it all the time in the shelter. And they talk to adults like they're 5. Like, you don't get to pity my team. They're badass. They're powerful, driven, amazing individuals that have gone through hell and come out the other side much stronger. And not just us, but any company would be lucky to have them. And now we have people working for Quicken Loans and Chrysler that start out with us. You know, the one that's working with Chrysler hadn't had a job ever before. We're her first real employment, and she was 21 and living in her car with her 3-year-old son when we hired her. And it took her 3 years to get to the point, like, I got to show up on time to work. And now she got the job with Chrysler within 3 days of looking for it. And we're saying, how do we scale that? How do we do that? And at the end of the day, I want to tell one story, and this really sums up Empowerment Plan and realizing that the job was the thing that actually made the impact. And her name was Annis Maxwell. She was hired on. She was one of the first people I ever employed. And she was 58 when I hired her. She had 10 years on her, she had 10 years felony track record. But it wasn't for violent crime, but she totally went into the interview thinking that she was not going to get the job. She just assumed right off the bat, she's like, I'm 58, I have kids and grandkids, and you know, when I got out of prison, I had money saved up, but no one would let me live in their apartment building because of my track record. There's no way you're going to take me on. There's no way. And when I hired her on, she was the toughest, but then became the den mother to every single person on the team, including myself. She was, if you were coming out of the shelter and you needed help, you talked to her. And her famous line was, if you ever want me to leave, you're going to have to roll me to the curb in my sewing chair. I'm like, that's awesome. I want to get that up. And that was her like, infamous line. And she got to the point where she had her house, she had a car, she had a college fund saved up for her granddaughter. And her toughest thing at that point was like, well, who do I go and hang out with now? She's like, I want to go shopping. I'm like, okay, awesome. We can deal with this. And one day on her way home from work, she's getting out of her car and walking to her house, and she collapses and dies of a heart attack. And that crushed us. We built a whole culture around this person, about that family feeling, about somebody that knows that you're there, that somebody cares. And losing her, we weren't even sure if Empowerment Plan would work. And so we're all there at the funeral service, and everyone talks about this before and after Annis. And I thought they were talking about prison. And then her son gets up and talks, and he says, I don't think you understand, Veronika, how much my mother loved you. She had your Facebook photo printed and framed in our house. It is not that good of a Facebook photo. And I've gotten to know my mother more in the last 3 years than I have my entire life, and you gave my daughter her grandmother back. And I want you to know how much that means to me and means to all of us. And we're all a mess, and it was probably singly the hardest moment I've ever had to go through, period. And that was the moment I recognized that this is not just a silly class project anymore, but this one job that started off as just as a coat in school turned into a way to leave a legacy behind. And how much that one chance at employment really impacted not just this one person, but many for generations. And I just want to leave you guys with that, because I think all of you guys have that same power to impact a lot of people. So thank you so much.